Nice to see you.
Coming up to 8:45.
50 years ago today, Martin Luther King delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. At the time, of course, the United States was a racially divided country.
Today, America's first black president, Barack Obama, will stand in the same place as the civil rights campaigner stood at the Lincoln Memorial as he commemorates the March on Washington.
It was one of the largest gatherings in American history. Hundreds of thousands of people marched from across the country to Washington. They were led by the activist Martin Luther King, calling for equal rights at a time when the US was racially divided and deeply segregated. Dr. King addressed the crowd with his vision. His advisor, Clarence Jones, helped him draft it.
The speech that is celebrated was completely spontaneous and extemporaneous. It was not the text of the speech, the complete text of the speech, that he had planned to give. At some point while he was reading from the prepared text, his favorite gospel singer, Mahalia Jackson, she was very close to Dr. King. She shouted to him, "Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream."
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Dad was using us as an analogy, but he really was talking about all of the children, all children of color, and how they were judged. If you ask, am I judged by the content of my character? Probably. I'm an older person. I generally wear suits. But I think when it comes to younger people, they are judged by color first and not the content of their character.
So how do those words, which were delivered here 50 years ago, resonate in today's America? The country might have its first black president at the helm, but people who are gathering at events to commemorate the famous "I Have a Dream" speech say they're here because they want greater equality.
I was so young back then during the first march, and so I wanted to be a part of today because someone had to march for my rights back then, and so I'm marching for the rights of my children and future generations to come.
We gained a lot in the last 50 years. We have a lot more to go.
I feel as if I'm the dream, even though we have a long way to go, but I've reaped the benefits of the march.
Job, not jail! 50 years on, and the March for Equality continues. Later today, President Obama will address a large rally in honor of the speech. While huge progress has been made, many in America say they'll keep pushing until Martin Luther King's dream is fully realized. Rajini Vaidyanathan, BBC News, Washington.
Well, a performance poet, Benjamin Zephaniah, is here now to discuss the impact of that speech 50 years on. Very good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
When did you become aware of it and how powerful it was?
Well, it's one of those things that was always there. I think when he did the speech, I was 5 or something. And so it was always there. And I come from a family that was very highly involved in the church. So that kind of style of delivery I was quite familiar with. But it was always there. If something wasn't going quite right, Mum would say, "Remember, have a dream," you know, that kind of thing.
Really?
So it was always there.
I was going to say, was it the words or the way they were delivered that resonated with you most?
Actually, a combination of both. The delivery is quite important. I think of it as a piece of poetry because there are lots of kind of poetic techniques that are used in it. I mean, the repetition for one. If you hear a good performance poem, you don't remember all the poem. It's impossible to remember the whole piece. It would be impossible for someone to remember. I think the speech is 15 minutes long to remember all of it. But you do remember, "I have a dream," because you repeat it so often. "Let freedom ring. The time is now. Now is the time." And that technique is done to kind of drum the basic message into you, even if you can't remember every individual word.
And of course that phrase, I have a dream, we've been hearing is a phrase that may not have made it into the speech.
Yeah, the thing about the speech is that it's not all Martin Luther King. Just like, I shouldn't say this in the same breath, but Tony Blair or Gordon Brown, they have writers, right? And a group of people sat down before and wrote most of the speech. And you can see when he delivers it, it's a bit slow. It's not that he's struggling, but he's looking down at the paper and he's looking up. And somebody actually comes and changes the microphone because he's looking down so much. But then he goes away from the text. And you can hear a woman in the background say, tell him about the dream, tell him about the dream. And then he just goes into the I have a dream, which he had actually rehearsed a few times before at some other rallies. But it all came together on that day for lots of different reasons. There was the feeling amongst the people was people were just so angry. People really wanted change.
50 years ago, America was a very, very different country.
Yes.
The idea that it would one day have a black president was unimaginable, really, in those days. And yet, do you think that the dream has been realised?
Absolutely not. I mean, it would be ridiculous to say that, you know, lots of things haven't been achieved, like you say, a black president. But the sad irony is, if you look at the speech, he doesn't just talk about having a dream and this multicultural, multicoloured world. He actually talks about peace. After the speech, he went out of favour because he talked about, well, anti-Vietnam War. He talked about not going to war. And I think it's quite ironic that Obama is going to stand in the same place now and he's thinking about going to war.
And what about here and the effect it might have had on the black community here? Do you feel 50 years on that you are judged on the content of your character rather than the colour of your skin?
Unfortunately, there are many times when I'm just judged by the colour of my skin. Sometimes I'm judged by the length of my locks. You know, I've had people that have just walked up to me and said, hey man, where's the weed? I've had people that have asked me, when am I going home? But again, we've made a lot of progress. But on the Sunday version of this programme, I heard the mother of Anthony Walker, the young man that was killed in Liverpool, saying that she has to look at photographs and members of the family or friends will say, who's that? And she says, that's Anthony. He died of a racist attack. And I know many families in this country who say the same thing. So many of us have stories of racism and discrimination. But just like the women's movement, you have to acknowledge that a lot of progress has been made, but we haven't fulfilled the dream yet.
All right. Benjamin, great to see you. Thanks very much.
And Benjamin Zephaniah is taking part in a debate about the legacy of Martin Luther King. It's taking place at Sadler's Wells in London tonight.
And at BBC 2 tonight, 9 o'clock, there's also a special documentary about the speech.
Good to see you this morning, Benjamin. Thanks very much indeed.
Peace.
Time to get the weather now.